What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video today. We'll be talking about the 2022 Formula One driver lineup. Let's go and just jump straight into it. The Formula One driver lineup is going to see a ton of changes as drivers move to new places, and there will be a new rookie that will be joining the Formula One class in 2022. While some people depart, whether that is for Formula E or other motorsports, this will be the 2022 driver lineup, and we're going to jump into it right now. The first team we're going to talk about is the Constructors' Champions for, I believe, the 7th or 8th time, Mercedes. Mercedes is having some changes going into the 2022 season. Lewis Hamilton will be returning to try to win his 8th World Championship after coming up short on winning the World Championship after a late safety car came out with 6 laps to go. After Nicholas Latifi had some issues, he will be trying to win that 8th World Championship. The biggest thing is, will his age affect his driving ability? Lewis Hamilton will be 37 in 2022, and he's nearing, I believe, getting closer to the end of his career than he is in the beginning of his career. So I think Lewis Hamilton will have a chance to go for that World Championship. We have a new regulations coming in, so we really don't know how he's going to perform. He's going to have a new teammate next year. Valtteri Bottas is going to a new team that we'll talk about here in just a little bit. His teammate is going to be a driver from Williams, George Russell. George Russell has been a standout at Williams. He's been exceptional. He's had incredible runs. He qualifies sometimes in the final rounds of qualifying in Williams equipment. And for most of the year, until around the time it was announced he'd be going over to Mercedes to replace Valtteri Bottas, he had been out-qualifying Nicholas Latifi pretty much all season long. And he got his first career podium, as a matter of fact, albeit in a very controversial race in Belgium when they only completed 2 laps, which is a little bit ridiculous. But he was able to get his first ever podium finish. He will be joining to become teammates of Lewis Hamilton. Looking at this team going into 2022, both for the drivers, I think George Russell will give Lewis Hamilton a run for his money. And I think for the first time since 2016, we could see a clash of championship runs, similar to what Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton had in 2016. I think we're going to have a championship battle between these two going next year. These are the first 2 drivers in Formula One. The next team we're going to talk about is Red Bull. Red Bull is going to remain the same going into 2022. Max Verstappen, the defending world champion for 2021, will be looking to go back-to-back in championships and become the first driver, I think, become the next 2-time world champion in Formula One. He is the next big thing in Formula One. He's got 20 career Formula One victories, and in 2022, he'll be looking to have another really, really dominant season. And I think he is just beginning a very, very dominant career in Formula One at the age of only 24. He will be 25 years of age in 2022, and he's going to be, I think, a driver once again that is going to make a run for the championship in 2022. He will probably have to be both Mercedes drivers, and Mercedes once again has really full power going into 2022, but he's the 3rd driver. His teammate for 2022 is going to once again be Sergio Perez. Sergio Perez had a pretty solid year in 2022. He got, I think, 1 or 2 victories in 2022, picking up, I think, his only win, I think, at Baku. But he was very, very consistent throughout the year. He had a lot of penalties, unfortunately, cost him a lot of really strong runs, but he finished top 5 in the standings, I believe finishing 4th in the World Championship behind Bottas, Verstappen, and Hamilton. But he was extremely, really good at points and was one of the biggest reasons why Max Verstappen was able to win his first World Championship by keeping Lewis Hamilton, slowing him down enough, and did really, really amazing defending, similar to what Fernando Alonso did against Lewis Hamilton at the Hungarian GP. Sergio Perez is going to be very fun to watch going into 2022, and hopefully he'll do really good in 2022 for Red Bull. The 3rd team we're going to talk about is Ferrari. Ferrari is going to remain the same going into 2022, as Charles Leclerc will be the first driver we're going to talk about. Charles Leclerc had some really, really high moments. He had a really, really strong moment in the Silverstone GP, the British GP at Silverstone, but unfortunately lost the race around 3 to 4 laps ago. Ferrari definitely got their footing back in 2021, and they are likely going to become a better team. They got some new engines later in the year, and it really, really helped their team. And that'll hopefully help Charles Leclerc get back to his championship form. Charles Leclerc had a really, really good moments, and hopefully in 2022, he's going to come in strong, help this team, build some confidence, and hopefully he will get back to his winning ways. I think Charles Leclerc is a very, very talented driver, and I think he'll do good next year in 2022. His teammate in 2022 is going to once again be Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz had some extraordinary performances in 2022. I will say that he was better this year than Charles Leclerc at Ferrari this year. And I've always thought that Carlos Sainz has been an extremely talented driver. But I didn't realize how good he was until this year, joining up with Ferrari. I think kind of was one of the big reasons why Ferrari kind of got back to their winning ways. They became a team that was much more consistent, knew what they were doing on the racetrack, and was performing a lot better as a driver. And also got a couple podiums, including in the season finale race at Abu Dhabi at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix in the United Arab Emirates. He did extremely well, and like I said, I'm really excited to see what Ferrari can do next year. Will the regulations happen? That is something to be determined. But these are the two drivers that will race at Ferrari in 2022. The next team we're going to talk about is McLaren, and it will remain the same going into 2022. First driver we'll talk about is Lando Norris. Lando Norris had an extremely good season, really up until about Russia. Lando Norris had a very, very good season. At points this year, he was actually the best of the rest of the field in certain points of the 2021 F1 season, and nearly won a couple races, including in Russia, where he actually dominated that race and had the car to beat in that event before, unfortunately, rain came in with about 4 or 5 laps to go in the race, and unfortunately, he overdrove the corner, ended up finishing, I believe, 5th or 7th or 8th in the race, instead of going to victory lane, which is disappointing. They probably should have just brought him in the pit road in that race, but they decided to leave him out, and he lost the race 2 laps ago, and that's why Lewis Hamilton picked up, I believe, his 100th career Formula 1 victory was that race. Lando Norris, unfortunately, lost, and really after that, he kind of lost his mojo that he kind of brought up. But Lando Norris, no doubt, has a lot of talent, and even Lando Norris had to give a lot of respect to, when you have the best driver in Formula 1 history, basically telling you that he has a lot of respect for you. He's someone you got a lot of respect, and I think Lando Norris will be very, very fun to watch next year. His teammate is going to be Daniel Ricciardo. Daniel Ricciardo had a very good, pretty, unfortunately, most of the year kind of underwhelming, which is a little surprising, considering he was going from Alfa Romeo, he was going to a better team. And to be perfectly, well, Renault, I think. But really, he kind of had a disappointing season in 2021. However, he did at least have something that Lando Norris did not have McLaren, is he got McLaren's first win in many, many years by winning the Italian Grand Prix. And before all you say he didn't earn that win, he dominated the race, had the fast car on the weekend, won the sprint race, and was able to basically have an incredible start and went on to win this race. He had an extremely great weekend there, and then he started kind of picking up in the second portion of the year. So will we see the Daniel Ricciardo we saw at Rebel? That is something to be determined going into next season. But both these drivers, I think, are going to be very, very solid to watch. And I think McLaren is a team that can do very, very well. And they're getting involved in IndyCar too. So eventually maybe Paddle Ward will come over to this team long term. But these are 2 drivers at McLaren. The next team we're going to talk about is Alpine, which is basically Renault. They will have the same 2 drivers they had in 2021. Let's first talk about Fernando Alonso. Fernando Alonso came back to Formula 1 in 2021, and honestly, Fernando Alonso had a pretty decent year. The expectations for him were not really through the roof, considering he wasn't in a great team. But he had some really, really stellar performances, including that defending he had against Lewis Hamilton, and actually getting his first podium since Hungary in 2014 in the I think it was a Qatar GP. Yeah, the Qatar GP. He had basically one of his best runs at Qatar GP and got his first podium in nearly 7 years. So Fernando Alonso will be looking to have a very, very strong run in 2022, and hopefully with the regulations, it'll help him going into next year. His teammate, once again, is going to be Esteban Ocon. After that whole debacle and after Lewis Hamilton had to pit in the Hungarian GP, he had to hold off a hard-charging Sebastian Vettel. Again, had to hold off Aston Martin and hard-charging Sebastian Vettel to pick up his first career Formula 1 victory, and he ended up doing it. As a matter of fact, he actually led the most laps of anybody that was not named Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. And Esteban Ocon, of course, was a development driver for the Mercedes camp. This guy has a ton of talent, and I think going into next year, I think we're going to see something really special come from Esteban Ocon. I really like him a lot. The guy knows what he's doing, and I think that this team is going to be a team that's going to break through next year, and those are the 2 drivers for Alpine. The next team we're going to talk about is Aston Martin. Aston Martin as well. Actually, we're talking about AlphaTauri. AlphaTauri, once again, is going to remain the same going into the 2022 season. Let's first talk about Pierre Gasly. Pierre Gasly had some pretty good performances in the year, but also points was very, very disappointing. Some of the strategy calls that he made at AlphaTauri were a little bit questionable, but he did have some pretty solid performances with the AlphaTauri camp, which is basically the sisterhood team to the Red Bull organization, which is probably why Red Bull made some of the calls for him, which probably affected some really, really strong runs for him. But Pierre Gasly definitely is a driver that really has kind of proved himself. When he went over to Red Bull a couple years ago, he really was very disappointing. But coming over to AlphaTauri, he's had some very, very solid performances, including in 2021. And he had a decent year overall. I believe he finished top 10 in the overall standings in Formula 1. I think he finished like 7th or 8th in the overall standings, which is pretty impressive. And he'll be returning to this team once again in 2022. His teammate will once again be Yuki Tsunoda. Yuki Tsunoda, I had a little bit high expectations for him going into 2022. But the thing about Yuki Tsunoda is he started off the year very, very bad. However, as the year progressed for Yuki Tsunoda's performance actually started to uptick. As a matter of fact, Yuki Tsunoda nearly almost got his first career podium earlier this year in the season finale Abu Dhabi and was running in a top 5 in that race as well and had some pretty stellar performances and was starting to be a much more consistent driver in the field. Was starting to score some points paying finishes, started scoring some points and just doing extremely well in the latter portions of the season. He was a little bit aggressive, a little bit over his head in the beginning of the season, but as the season progressed for Yuki Tsunoda, I think he overall got a lot better as a driver, and I really hope we can see more from him in 2022. Because I like to see Yuki Tsunoda improve. I think he's got a lot of talent. I think he's got what it takes, and he will once again return to AlphaTauri Racing in 2022 to hopefully help their organization. The next team we're going to talk about is Aston Martin, and they will have the same two drivers that drove for Aston Martin in 2021 drive for them in 2022. Sebastian Vettel came over to team from Ferrari to come over to team in 2021, and now in 2022 he'll be looking to improve on 2021. He has some pretty solid performances at points throughout the year, but Sebastian Vettel has really just not been the same really since early portions of his time at Ferrari. He really was not that great at points, but he did get up a couple of podium finishes, including finishing runner-up to Esteban Ocon in the Hungarian GP. The thing about Sebastian Vettel is I don't know how he's going to do next year with the regulations, and we really don't know how they're going to do. A lot of people thought that with Sebastian Vettel coming over to this team in 2021, a lot of people's expectations were that we were going to see this team really take major improvements, and they were starting to slowly improve with Aston Martin, but I do think a lot of that did help in the fact of how good Sergio Perez was and got that team their first victory. But the expectations of Sebastian Vettel are going to be very, very high going into next year, and hopefully he'll be able to do well. His teammate, once again, is going to be Lance Stroll. Of course, makes a lot of sense. Lawrence Stroll basically owns the team right now. He basically bought the team, so it makes a lot of sense why Lance Stroll is there. Lance Stroll was definitely very, very disappointing this year. After ending the season pretty decently in 2020, we all expected Lando Norris to be a little bit better than he was. And unfortunately, that really wasn't the case whatsoever for Lance Stroll. Lance Stroll we all thought was going to be better, and again, he didn't really show that. He didn't have really any podium finishes. He got some points-paying finishes throughout the year, but really wasn't impressive. So I think a lot of people's expectations for Aston Martin going into next year are not going to be extremely through the roof, but hopefully going into next year, we can see this team improve, and hopefully with the new regulations, they can improve. The 8th team we're going to talk about is Alfa Romeo Sauber. And there are some changes coming to this team as this team is going to be ripped open and there are 2 new drivers coming to the team as Kimi Räikkönen is retiring at the end of this year and Antonio Giovinazzi is going to be going to Penske Dragon Racing in Formula E. So he'll be going into the Penske organization in 2022. The first driver is going to be Valtteri Bottas, who's coming over from Mercedes. Valtteri Bottas really started coming on strong at the end of the season in Formula 1 and actually picked up his first win in Russia in nearly over a year since the beginning of the 2020 Formula 1 season. And I think Bottas really needed a breath of fresh air because he kind of just got tired, I think, of the calls that Mercedes was making. He basically became the second man of the team and always would listen to orders until really the end of the season. He's going to have a new breath of fresh air, and I think he's going to be the lead driver at this team with his veteran experience. I don't think Valtteri Bottas is a bad driver. I think he's a very, very solid driver. The issue is he's not a Lewis Hamilton caliber. And when you're at Mercedes, you're going to have to be on the same level of Lewis Hamilton because Lewis Hamilton is an extremely talented and extremely great driver. So hopefully with this, hopefully Valtteri Bottas can do very well. He'll be the first driver at Alfa Romeo. His teammate is going to be the first official full-time Chinese driver in Formula 1, Guan Yuzhou. Guan Yuzhou, I really wish that Oscar Piastri was taking this right. I think Oscar Piastri should be in this over Guan Yuzhou. But Guan Yuzhou did, I believe, get pick up, I think, his first or second sprint race victories earlier at the end of the year at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix weekend for Formula 2. So he does have talent behind him, and he's going into a team with new regulations, of course. But the expectations really for a lot of people should not be through the roof for Guan Yuzhou. because Guan Yuzhou really didn't have great karting experience. And again, he wasn't really great in Formula 3, but he did start picking it up at the end of his Formula 3 career and then got to Formula 2 and started doing pretty decent. So hopefully Guan Yuzhou can come in here and do very well, and he will drive for Alfa Romeo in 2022. The 19th we're going to talk about is Williams, and there are some changes that are coming to Williams going into 2022. Nicholas Latifi will be returning to Williams in 2022. Nicholas Latifi really started off this year potentially be one of the worst drivers and points paying-wise and everything in the Formula 1 grid. But as the year progressed, he did start to slowly improve and become a little bit of a better driver. And hopefully going into this upcoming season, he doesn't have an issue where he caused a safety car, where, of course, he got a lot of death threats and stuff, people that send him stuff. Hopefully that doesn't happen, and hopefully he won't have any problems from fans and everything, because a lot of fans went after him. I don't think he deserved the backlash that he got from that. So he will be the first driver that is going to be driving for this team going into 2022. Hopefully he can do very, very well. His teammate next year is actually going to be Alex Albon, who's going to be returning from, after not being in Formula 1 in 2021, after being let go, I believe it was, from Red Bull after 2020. Well, it was Alfa Romeo. It was Red Bull after 2020. He was not returning it in 2021, but he will be coming back to Williams. There have been talk maybe he was going to come over to IndyCar and race for one of the Dale Coyne racing cars, whether that was the 51 car or the 18. He was almost going to be in US and racing, but he will be back with Williams in 2022. The expectations are not going to be through the roof for Williams, but even though Williams may show a little bit more with the new engines coming in next year, the expectations for this team are not going to be very, very high for the organization. But Alex Albon will be coming over to this team in 2022, and hopefully Alex Albon can prove that he has potential to do this. I think he has talent, and hopefully Alex Albon, and it's a welcome sign to see Alex Albon come back. I feel like he kind of got shafted for really no reason. I feel a lot of people kind of felt that same way, but he will be going back and returning to Formula 1 in 2022. And the final team we're going to talk about is Haas. Haas will remain the same going into 2022. The first driver we're going to talk about is Mick Schumacher. Mick Schumacher was by far the best at Haas, really for most of the season, though some of his performances weren't that extremely impressive. That being said, though, I don't think it's entirely Mick Schumacher. I think a lot of it is the car. I do not think that the Haas cars are really that fast going into really, really fast right now. They were not really fast, and they're also part of the Ferrari plan, which is one thing to note, is that the Ferrari plan really was not great in 2021, really wasn't great in 2020, which is why their performances really, really stunk, and why back in 2020, Romain Grosjean and Kevin Magnussen really, really struggled back in 2020. They struggled back then. But that will be the first driver. Hopefully Mick Schumacher can prove that he's as good as his father and do really well next year. His teammate, once again, is going to be the one, the only Nikita Mazzupin, the controversial driver. Nikita Mazzupin had problems with drivers at the beginning of the year, but I will give him this. He did improve slightly. He did improve as a driver, and hopefully next year with this team, he can improve, not cause any trouble off the track, not cause any problems, and hopefully he can do well enough to not cause any trouble. And that will be the final team we'll discuss today. That is your 2022 Formula 1 driver lineup. So now jumping for me into a little bit of predictions for closing this out. What teams do I expect to be really, really good next year with the regulations? Well, we have not seen the regulations come to place. I think that there will be 4 teams that are really, really strong in 2022. I think that you're going to have one of the most strongest fields I think we've ever seen. I think it's going to be Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren, and Ferrari are going to be the teams to beat in 2022. With occasional good runs for some of the smaller teams besides, I think, Williams and Haas. I think every team has a shot of having really, really good runs next year. So I think those are going to be the 4 teams that are strong. I would not be shocked if Max Verstappen goes back to that, but I also would not be shocked if Lewis Hamilton gets his 8th World Championship. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but that is the official Formula 1 driver lineup for 2022. So like I said, that is the official 2022 Formula 1 driver lineup. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so you know when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my page as well. Links are below over that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about the 2022 Formula 1 driver lineup, and tell me what driver you think will be your F1 champion of the 20 drivers that will be competing in Formula 1. Let me know that in the comments below. Anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time with some more great, awesome motorsport and other content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.